People receive hundreds of digital messages a day, from push notifications to emails. So how do you engage your top prospects and stand out? By sending personalized gifts the old-fashioned way with Sendoso. Sendoso helps you use gift giving and direct mail throughout your customer lifecycle, from lead generation to converting customers into brand advocates. From sourcing to sending and centralizing the direct mail and gifting process, Sendoso helps you scale your gift giving, stand out, and keep your brand top of mind. Visit sendoso.com to learn more.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the ABM series on the B2B Growth Show. I'm your co-host, Dan Fronin, and I'm lucky enough to be the CMO here at Sendoso. I'm here today with Russel Banzon, and he's the Director of Demand Generation at Gong. How you doing, Russ?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing really well, man. It's a beautiful, cloudy day here in San Francisco, and having a good conversation with you. Would love for you to tell us a little bit about Gong. You guys are crushing it in the market right now, and really want to give the listeners here an opportunity to hear it directly from you on what you guys are up to and what you do.
Yeah, sure. It's been a fantastic year for Gong. For those who aren't familiar, Gong is a revenue intelligence platform that enables teams to operate based on reality and not on opinions. And ultimately, what it means for customers like ours, for like Sendoso, for example, is that it's the answer to their $1 million questions. And what I mean by $1 million questions is what separates the top reps from the rest of the pack? What competitors are creeping up in the market? How do I enable a strategy and deploy it across my entire revenue organization? Those are the types of questions that we're answering for a lot of our customers.
Awesome. Yeah, no, we're huge fans of Gong and use it a lot. So really happy to have you here and give you the opportunity to be on the show. So we are going to be talking ABM today. What I like to do on podcasts like this is actually start the conversation with your story, your career story, what got you to where you are, and then we can dive into what your ABM journeys look like.
Cool. Sounds good. So my background is, again, I'm the director of demand generation at Gong. Where I started my journey starts is that I'm a Bay Area guy, born and raised, except for 3 years where I lived in the Philippines. I started my career actually at Morgan Stanley in the finance area. I figured out very, very quickly, and if you have ever had experience in that area, you know that you'll figure it out quickly if it's for you or not for you. I was one who it was not for. One, I didn't like wearing the suits every single day. And two, it wasn't the right environment for me, although it is for many, many people. Shortly thereafter, I started my career in tech at Aptus, where I joined as an SDR. So I joined as a part of the sales organization and then quickly moved over to marketing. I was very, very lucky enough to be a part of 2 unicorns, and now a couple of years later, I'm now running demand gen at Gong.
Right on. Yeah. So I had the opportunity to work with you at Aptus, and I think that was a magical time for a lot of us. We had this amazing marketing team that Maria Pergolino had built. She really helped almost in a way define account-based marketing and brought in some of the early tools that we were using. And I think a really cool launching point for this conversation today is, since you've seen it from the ground up at Aptus and then throughout the amazing career that you've developed for yourself, is where do you even start with an ABM program? It's such a broad term. There's so many pieces of technology that can be applied to it.
So I get asked this question a lot. And for those of you listening at home who are getting started on this journey, be rest assured that 90% of the market hasn't figured it out yet. And so if you're like, I don't know where to start, I'm really, really worried. It seems like everybody's got it figured out. Nobody has it figured out yet.
And I find that fascinating that you mentioned that, because I was on a panel with a couple people at Growth Marketing Conference last week. And we asked by a show of hands, like, where are you within your ABM maturity, beginner, intermediate, or advanced? I'd say 95% of the room said we're beginner. Mm-hmm. One person said intermediate, and then the only person who said advanced was an ABM vendor. So it's nice to not only validate that from you, but also from a room full of marketers that are trying to figure this stuff out.
The other awesome thing about it is that you ask them in a room not filled with marketers who are facing the exact same problems, and you ask them as you were walking down the street, a bunch of people would say, yes, I totally haven't figured it out. Like, I know ABM like the back of my hand. We got it all solved. But going back to the original question, where do you start? It really does start, and it's kind of a trite statement to say, honestly, but it really does start with sales and marketing alignment. Mm-hmm. And it's so, so crucial. Like, that is the foundation of building an account-based program. I'll say account-based, not just marketing, but account-based sales as well. That is really at its core. I think having somebody in the marketing organization who gets that and knows how to work really well with sales is a crucial part of getting your ABM program kickstarted. A friend of mine, Shep, he was like, you work really, really well with sales, which enables us to have a program like ABM because you have a lot of sales empathy. Mm-hmm. And you need to have both sales empathy and marketing empathy on both sides to really get a program started. The next piece there, once you have that really strong alignment with the revenue organization, is coming to a mutual understanding around what is the target list of accounts. What's the ICP or ideal customer profile that we want to go after? Who are the personas that we want to go after? So that way you can come together. This isn't just marketing generated, but you can come together and agree upon a set list of target accounts depending on how big your ACV is. That may be 100 accounts and maybe 1,000 accounts, maybe 30,000 accounts. But nonetheless, you have to have some solid agreement around what the ICP and the target account list looks like. From there, it's pretty simple. And I don't mean to trivialize it, but it is pretty simple in that you just start with a POC. Justin Keller over at Sigster talks about this a lot, but you can start with a program that's just one-to-one to prove out the value. Don't go and try and tackle every single thing underneath the sun and do, website personalization with custom case studies, custom content assets, custom account-based advertising. Don't try and boil the ocean. Start with a small set. Maybe it's a one-to-one, maybe it's a one-to-few, but get that POC out there so that way you can start proving the value to your leadership team and really make ABM a part of your core through, proving the proof in the pudding, as they would say.
That's great. I think I love the sales empathy and the marketing empathy, because I think the more we understand each other's jobs and understand that neither side of the house has an easy button, I think the better off everyone's going to be. And one thing that we were iterating here at Sendoso recently is the idea of almost building a champion sort of relationship with sales and SDRs where, if someone's doing one-to-one really well, like make them your champion and have them start to teach the rest of the organization on how to do it as well, to get that adoption to be a little bit more organic than marketing telling sales to do something or vice versa.
Totally.
Love these tips. And I think that, you've given us a lot of actionable things on how we can get it up and running, but I'm sure you've learned a few things on what you should not do. So I'd love to give the listeners here a little bit of perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I was figuring out, I could rattle off a large number of things of what not to do. For anybody who I've worked with in the past, pardon me on this, but I've wasted a lot of time, effort, and dollars in figuring out what not to do along the way. So I've been fortunate to have that experience. And in trying to figure out the best way to kind of like simplify it, I came up with, as I was walking over here, like the 5 commandments of what not to do in ABM.
I love that.
So here's the 5 commandments. One is, I shall not use tech as the solution. And I emphasize the wrong word there, but it's the solution. A lot of times marketers will say, hey, I'm kickstarting my ABM program. It's time to go buy a solution out there in the market. And as great as solutions like 6sense are and Demandbase or Optimizely, the list goes on, it's not going to be the solution for you, and candidly shouldn't be the starting place. It's not, it's not a replica to drive sales and marketing alignment and things like that. The second one is, the second commandment is, I shall not preach that only one channel is ABM. And so I get a lot of questions around like what programs are like, how do you do ABM? It feels like ABM's just direct mail, right? It's not just direct mail. It's not just account-based advertising. It's not just web personalization. It's a holistic strategy that you need to employ across your sales and marketing organizations. The third commandment in the 5 commandments, what not to do in ABM, is I shall not run ABM as a silo in my organization. Another thing that happens a lot of times with folks starting an ABM program is that they'll assign one person. A lot of times it's somebody in demand generation and say, hey, go kickstart our ABM program, whatever that means, right? And that person will go and they'll try to do it on their own. They won't work with their sales team to, again, come to consensus around the list of target accounts. They won't work with their SDRs on maybe it's custom outreach sequences in order to really start to penetrate these accounts and things like that. They'll do it in a silo, and that's no recipe for success. You need to add and do this thing together. The fourth one is I shall not over automate. Drift, I think a lot about this with Drift. They came out with a book called This Won't Scale. And it's basically a book of things that they did to be really, really successful as an organization that theoretically don't scale, right? And a lot of times marketers will over-index onto things that'll scale and do a lot of automation. The gap this creates over time is the personalized approach to account-based marketing or account-based sales that creates raving fans. And creating raving fans, it's Gong's number one operating principle. It's the best thing that you can do for your organization, because if you create raving fans in the marketing and sales process, you create raving fans in your customer success and support organizations, those are going to be the customers that renew time and time again, that leave their organization and go and purchase you again in another organization, and et cetera, et cetera. It's all the things that make account-based marketing and sales really, really worthwhile, right? Is those types of raving fan experiences. So again, don't over-automate. There's a number of really cool things that you can do with the technology that exists in the world, but don't over-index on that side. Now, the last one is, I shall not stop evolving. And this is kind of what I mean is account-based marketing has been around for, I would say, about a decade, became really popular probably in 2012 to 2014-ish. So about 5 years ago. And it's really candidly still in its infancy. There's still a number of different things, whether it be tech, programs, processes that are still being developed. And so by no means, even though you're 10 years in and you think that you've got it all figured out, you probably don't. And it's important to keep that learning mindset. As Charlie Munger would say, be a learning machine. And that's how you'll continue to cut through the noise. I mean, ABM was invented because broad-based marketing wasn't getting the job done anymore. And so in order to cut through the noise, you got to continue to evolve, continue to push yourself and be creative in terms of how do you cut through that noise.
These are amazing. I think I'm going to take these 5 commandments and I'm going to tape them on my wall and the rest of my team's wall.
Nice.
I think it's super fascinating that multi-channel and integrated marketing fundamentals are coming back in. I think for quite a while, people have relied on technology to start doing that for us.
Mm-hmm.
But it's up to us as marketing tacticians to really go and really map out and look at what a journey looks like and what needs to be there at any one moment in time, right? And I think this whole notion of that you should never stop evolving is just so amazing. I think it's incumbent upon marketers to keep pushing the envelope and to wake up every morning and say, I'm only as good as my last day. What am I doing today?
Yeah.
So I hope the world adopts these. You heard them here first, guys. I think the next thing that would be amazing to unpack with you would be, having taken these learnings of what to do and what not to do and apply it to what you're doing today at Gong. You guys have been doing a lot of really cool things. I hear about them constantly on social media. I think you guys are winning some awards at some point as well. So just tell me about it.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'll caveat this with safe harbor statement before I continue on in this conversation is that I'm definitely one of those marketers in that room that you talked about earlier that would raise their hand and say, hey, this is still the beginning for us. Mm-hmm. And by no means have we figured it out. I think we've figured out a few things along the way that I think are interesting to share. And the framework that I like to talk about it in is that our ABM program is multifaceted. And it is really, we do the one-to-one, we do the one-to-few, and then we also do the one-to-many. Again, it started with the core base of target accounts that we want to go after, that SDRs and sales all agrees upon with the marketing organization. And then I'll talk briefly about the one-to-one. What we've done on that side and what I've really done over time is over-indexed on the partnership with the SDR team. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's the fact that I used to manage SDRs or used to be an SDR myself, but I see them as kind of the linchpin in making, especially one-to-one, work really well. And a few examples of that we've gone after today is hopefully every salesperson and SDR has their list of top 10 or top 15 accounts that they really want to break into. That's a part of their go-to-market strategy to hit their number in the month, right? And what we'll have them do is be almost like mini marketers, and we'll enable them with things like their own budget in order to go after and figure out different prospecting plays to break into different accounts. One very tangible example that we had this gal, Nicolette. She's a strategic SDR on our team at Gong. She had a target account. It was Experian. And she read about one of her prospects. Her name was Robin Norris. She's an SVP of sales effectiveness over at Experian. She wrote about on her LinkedIn that the size of a home plate doesn't change despite what level you're at in baseball. I have no clue how she tied that to sales or sales effectiveness, candidly, but that's what she wrote about. And Nicolette was like, hey, here's my target account, and this is the target persona that we really need to get after. What can I do on a one-to-one level to create a raving fan out of Robin Norris? And so what she did was she sent her a home plate. It was a big box that arrived on her desk, and it was a one-to-one program, like literally not only one-to-one with the account, but one-to-one with the person. It was a person-level targeting and program created just for her. It was a home plate sent with a handwritten note that ties, the home plate and the piece that she wrote about to what we do over at Gong. And that was massively impactful. She posted it on social media. She tagged her CEO. She tagged her CRO. And lo and behold, a few months later, Experian was a close-won customer for us. So that one-to-one level works really, really well. And again, creating those raving fans.
That's amazing. I think there's a lot of talk around, one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many. And when you get to one-to-one, are there any easy ways to kind of, I think as marketers and sellers, we're always trying to hack the process to make it as fast as possible. But that's just a clear example of a really smart SDR knowing who her audience is and spending 5 minutes learning that a central theme in a story is a home plate and winning, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have any guidance for the listeners on how much time to dedicate to doing some of this one-to-one research so that people can win at scale that way?
Totally. Like I mentioned earlier, there's always that set of accounts that is going to be, if we were to close this customer, is going to be a great reference for us and is likely going to be double our normal ASP. And that's like their list of top 10 accounts that they need to go after every single month. And so how much time should you spend doing personalized level outreach to these folks is almost 100% of your time, because it's tied into your everyday efforts of doing account-based sales. That's the whole reason why we do account-based sales. Yes, we do have an inbound SDR team, and we do have processes to route those things to account executives to work on. But how much should you be spending on creating those personalized experiences for your top list of accounts? Almost all your time from an outbound perspective.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I think I'd love to drop into a little bit more of the topic around one-to-one, one-to-few, and one-to-many. And from your perspective, maybe take me through how you think they're the same, how they're different, and any myths that you think might exist that ABM has to be one-to-one to qualify for like this magic ABM designation.
Yeah. Mythbusters alert. ABM does not need to be one-to-one.
You heard it here, people.
Yes, 100% does not only need to be one-to-one. It can be one-to-one. And if you have a very large enterprise sale where you're talking about 6 or 7 figures ARR for certain customers, one-to-one may be the right strategy for you, but it's not the only strategy with ABM. And you don't have to go, again, full bore and create a custom sales deck coupled with a custom ebook, coupled with that one-to-one direct mail package that you may have. You don't need to only do that. And so, for example, like at Gong, we also have programs that we run between one to few and one to many. So from the tens of accounts to maybe the hundreds of accounts is what we'll run plays like this for. And I'll give another example that's even specifically direct mail focused. And that one is what I like to call the mini Gong campaign. We came up with this campaign to send to a couple hundred target accounts, and we've probably sent around 500 of these over time, where we package up a mini Gong, nice handwritten note. We'll send it out to the prospect who's likely a director of sales or a VP of sales, somebody who's overseeing a sales team and has direct line of sight onto who's doing really well in that sales organization and who isn't, right? And usually that's the people managers. And what we've sent them, and again, this is an example of a one-to-many campaign, is we know that the pain point that a lot of these folks have is, I need to figure out what the heck Sally is doing as my top performer and replicate that across my entire organization.
Yep.
And so we send these folks a mini Gong just to get the conversation started. And it doesn't have any CTA in it. I get a lot of pushback on this from a number of different marketers, but there's no CTA in the box. It's not go visit this webpage and request a demo. It's not even email me back and schedule 15 minutes on the calendar. Another Mythbuster alert, when you close out your emails with, when does this week work for 15 minutes? A lot of times this doesn't work, right? You got to get the conversation started in another way. And so what it'll say with this mini Gong is, hey, give this to your top performer and allow it to move every single month or quarter. You get to decide, but honor this person with this miniature Gong because they deserve that extra recognition. And we'll email them, and this is where the partnership with sales is so crucial. We'll email them after with a custom outreach sequence that says something to the rhyme of, hey, who did you give it to? And they'll say, hey, I gave it to Dan. He was my star performer last month. He closed the most ACV for us. And then, of course, we then continue the conversation. Eventually, we go for the close and we say, hey, how would you like to replicate what Dan's doing across your entire team? Gong can help you with that.
That's amazing. I had an early boss who, when I first started in marketing, that would just get so mad at me because I would write ads, I would write emails, and I would never have a call to action. And he just drilled it into my head as almost one of the commandments of you must have a call to action. But I think you're approaching this in such a modern way where landing that gong on someone's desk, I mean, what more of a meaningful impression can you make than having something that becomes symbolic across their entire organization? And when they're ready for your help, you're there waiting to help them, right? So really, really cool program. What about when you get into one-to-many? So we've heard one-to-one, we've heard one-to-few, but what does it take to really get ABM running at scale for a larger set of accounts? Yeah,
I'm happy to talk about the one-to-many piece, but one final story on that you reminded me of as you talked about the no CTA thing. It reminds me of how the story that my CMO, Rudy Lettergore, often tells people, which is around wedding rings. And he says, like, hey, diamond rings weren't a thing, but a company that makes diamonds tried to instill it as tradition within a lot of people. And eventually, over time, it became symbolic for something else, not related to buying a diamond ring. And that wasn't even a call to action, but really the strategy was to influence the market enough to make this as a part of the tradition of what they do. And the mini Gong campaign is kind of an example of that, is have this mini Gong travel around. It's not as impactful as a diamond ring, nor is it as expensive, but reminds me of something similar.
That's fantastic.
The one-to-many piece An easy way to do this is to really hone in on your ICP. And we talk a lot about at Gong around Jeffrey Moore's crossing the chasm strategy, from going from really like the innovators to the early adopters to the early majority to the late majority. And what we've done is we looked at different clusters of customers. Where are there clusters of customers where if one prospect saw that we had these 5 customers that are the early majority, or maybe they're the innovators in the category, they would almost feel like they're being left behind. And this is a very simple one-to-many strategy, because once you've identified those things, and one of the ones that we identified where we have a ton of customers around is MarTech, for example. So we have customers like Sendoso, like Drift, like HubSpot, for example. And if you were to show those 3 logos to anyone in MarTech, you would definitely get their head to turn. And we were able to deploy, an outreach sequence, a direct mail play, and just not even drastically changing the slide deck there, but changing it so much that it still feels very relevant to that target audience. And we were able to deploy that across the entire MarTech space, which is a pretty large set of accounts. If you looked at the Lumascape today, you'd probably see 7,000 accounts in there.
Yep.
So that's the thousands, the one-to-many type strategy that we've been able to employ to some pretty good success. It's still early days for us, candidly, in rolling a campaign like that out. But what we expect to see is for the late majority to be captured, so a lot more of the MarTech companies to be penetrated, and higher close rates, higher ASP, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and that's amazing, because when you're describing your one-to-many strategy, it really kind of goes back to the fundamentals that you outlined in your commandments around multi-channel. And you're really thinking about the outreach, you're thinking about what channels you're using for air cover, and the language and the ICP. And it just sounds like, from what you're saying, it is possible to do ABM at scale to many people. And it's almost as if when conversations start to get more one-to-one, that's when you start to employ the one-to-few and the one-to-one to get more meaningful relationships as you ultimately partner with organizations to help them with the revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And the hard thing, I think, for ABM marketers today is to figure out, what is that right balance? Where should I focus on? Is the nature of my business where I need to focus again on the one-to-one because I have 6-7 figure ACV and my TAM is really, really small and finite? Or do I need to do a one-to-many, or do I need to do something of a balance, something like what we're doing over here at Gong? And so finding that right balance is a really, really hard challenge for us as marketers.
Amazing. We are coming up on time, but I wanted to finish with one last question. And 2020 is on everyone's mind right now. In fact, most people will probably be listening to this in 2020. So tell us, what are you most excited about going into 2020 from just a marketing business standpoint?
Yeah. What I'm looking forward to in 2020 is, candidly, it's really seeing the advancement of where we at Gong can take our data program, honestly. That's one of the things that we talk about a lot, but earlier we talked about how accounts and having that alignment from a sales and marketing perspective is crucial. But the underpinning of that, right above your sales and marketing alignment, is the data infrastructure that you're feeding to create some of these programs. And that's things like maybe it's a data fox, maybe it's a Discoverword to fill your account level data. Maybe it's a Clearbit, a Lucia, a Lead IQ to fill your contact level data. Maybe it's like a Zoom Info and Discoverword combined to fill all those gaps, right? And we're at Gong really pushing our sophistication there, because again, it's the underpinning of our ability to scale our entire organization. We're going to go from what is currently, around maybe 60 or 70 sellers today, and we're going to bring that to 100 plus in 2020. And so we're scaling the organization quite a bit. From a marketing perspective, we're going from 4 marketers when I joined only 10 or 11 months ago to now 11, and we'll be 25 in the next 2 quarters or so. And so we're hiring really rapidly. And again, the data infrastructure that we're really, really working on sophisticating is something I'm really excited about in 2020.
That does sound super exciting. And I think that would probably be one of my biggest things that I'm excited about as well. I think data has just come so far. And as I think someone said recently, and I can't remember who it was, data is the new oil. Can't have the engine really running without having it nice and lubricated, right?
Yeah.
Well, Russell, I want to thank you so much for joining today. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Tell our listeners, how can they follow you and learn more about Gong? How can they stay in touch and just hear all the amazing things you have to say on social?
Sure. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn user. My girlfriend probably wants to kill me for it, but I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So feel free to shoot me a connection request. I'm more than happy to continue the conversation there. If you want to learn more about Gong and some of the roles we're hiring for, I would definitely encourage you to. That's www.gong.io. And you can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook as well.
Perfect. Well, that's all for today, everyone. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the series to hear the latest from leaders on the B2B Growth Show. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Dan.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.